We have a huge New York Rangers free agency update as multiple reports have come out stating that 2 major signings are incoming and that Chris Drury's offseason has barely begun. He has big plans for the Rangers. We're going to break all of that down, but before we do, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 70% of you now watching our videos are not actually subscribed to the channel, so if you want to do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Today's video, of course, is about Braden Schneider, who you guys, I've seen the comments, have so graciously reminded me that I accidentally said Brandon the other day. And of course, Ryan Lindgren, 2 players who were given qualifying offers. Obviously, Lindgren has opted for arbitration. We went through that in a video a couple days ago. But of course, the other topic is Schneider as well, right? That's a huge topic as well. So we'll dive right into it. And of course, this is from Vince, who I love all of his work. I've been using a lot of his work the last couple of videos, and he's putting in I love his insight, right? And he's putting in great work. So we'll dive right into it. He posted an article just this morning. Are the New York Rangers done yet? Here's everything I've gathered on the offseason that's gone quiet, packed into 5 thoughts on the likelihood of more moves, the latest buzz on RFAs Lindgren and Schneider, where they go from here with Trouba, and the state of the lineup. Now, for the sake of today's video, we will be focusing on just the RFAs Lindgren and Schneider, of course, and we'll get into the lineup, what it might look like next season, and what their salary cap projections might be, what both these players might make moving forward. So, of course, with the lineup, what we thought was going to happen, with them acquiring, are the Rangers better or are they not? That's a question amongst all Rangers fans right now. That's basically what it comes down to, right? So some will contend that the Rangers, this is from Vince once again, are slightly better with the trade acquisition of Riley Smith, replacing the inconsistent Jack Roslovic as the top 6 right winger, which is probably true. And from a salary cap perspective, paying Sam Carrick $1 million per season to be your 4th line center is better than paying Barclay Goodrow over $3.6 million to do the same job. That is 100% true, right? I mean, Barclay Goodrow basically did nothing in the regular season last year. And yes, he was a bit of a playoff performer and always has been, but you need a guy who can kind of do both and is, cost controlled, right? Because Barclay Goodrow making almost $4 million was kind of holding the Rangers down. They can do a lot with that salary cap, especially, I keep mentioning it, Shesterkin next year. It's going to be a big deal, right? It's going to be a talking point all season. But no one can argue in good faith that those moves change the outlook for the squad that struggled to keep pace with the league's best at 5-on-5 for several years running. And that's exactly it, right? So that is more on the lineup specifically. And now let's dive right into, like I mentioned, Ryan Lindgren and Braden Schneider updates. So the only remaining business items that we can comfortably predict will happen this summer involves the Rangers' final 2 RFAs and both of these defensemen. Word is that they're making progress with Schneider on a bridge deal, likely 2 or 3 years, for an average annual value in the range of $2.5 million. Now that I think is pretty interesting, because if you look at the player in Schneider, $2.5 million AAV is not too bad, right? I don't think that's anything Rangers fans would be upset about. This is a very young player still. He's only going to be 23. He's obviously a big player. He's going to be a big part of the lineup going forward. He's shown that he can play at the NHL level, and that Laviolette can kind of depend on him in certain situations. He stays healthy. That's another thing that's underrated about him, right? He plays almost every game. He's used in different situations. So this is a very valuable young player for the New York Rangers, who I think is going to be a really good player for them moving forward. So I don't hate that move at all. I do not hate the $2.5 million. I think that's great. Obviously, it's taking a chunk out of your salary, but that's why you moved on from a guy like Barclay Goodrow to free up salary to be able to sign this player to a contract like this. And I don't hate the contract at all. I think it's great if that's what it ends up being. Obviously, we're going to have to see the years. If it ends up being 2 to 3, it's going to be a bridge deal, right? Which I think is not bad for the Rangers, because you'll have more certainty with what your cap situation looks like in 2 to 3 years anyway. So I think it's great, right? I think it's great. And the situation may be a bit trickier for Lindgren, though, with both sides wanting to continue the relationship. And it's not like the Rangers have many alternatives now that are, realistic, with the UFA options being, dwindling down to pretty much nothing, especially on the defensive end. There's confidence they'll get something done, but not before some back and forth haggling. And I think the one thing to keep in mind here too is Lindgren filed for arbitration, which I mentioned in a video just a couple days ago, which means he's going to make no less than $3 million. So his raise is going to be much more significant than Schneider's, although Lindgren is, I would argue, a more significant player on the Rangers lineup, and a lot of fans want him traded. This guy's a warrior. I like this player. I think you can win with this player. He was really beat up in last playoffs, so I would chalk up any mistakes to that. Even with Jacob Trouba, he was injured, and decision-making when you're injured, it takes a toll, right? You make some weird decisions when you're injured, so I will defend him in that way. I think Lindgren is a good player, and he would help the Rangers win, so there is that as well. And when you look at the projected lineup, too, Vince was projecting that Schneider's actually going to move up in the lineup, which means Trouba could move down, so you're going to have an $8 million defenseman potentially on your third pairing, but his projected lineup, which I tend to agree with, would be Adam Fox and Ryan Lindgren on the top. I think that would be great. K'Andre Miller and Schneider there in the top four. I think that would be great as well. And I love the handedness that the Rangers have, because then you got Zach Jones, left shot defenseman, who's going to take a step next year. He's probably going to be a regular NHLer, and I'm excited to see what he does in the NHL next year with Jacob Trouba. And I think that can be really good for Zach Jones to have a guy who's as experienced as Trouba beside him. If Trouba stays in the lineup, we'll see what happens with that. The summer is still relatively young, and I think Chris Drury has some tricks up his sleeve, which we'll get to in just a second. So it's going to be interesting to see how the lineup shakes out exactly. And if you look at this quote from Vince as well, word is that they're making progress with Schneider on a bridge deal, likely 2 to 3 years. So just a reminder that, it's going to be 2 to 3 years and probably $2.5 million, according to one person with knowledge on the situation. So that is what you can expect for the contract. And like I said, with Ryan Lindgren, it's looking like more of, it's going to be more than $3 million. So whatever that looks like, I'm going to assume it's going to start with a 4. That's what I'm assuming. There was projections that he can make as much as 6. I think that's far too much. If he wants that much, you're going to have to make a difficult decision if you're the New York Rangers. So, it's going to be more than 3. That's what we know at this point, but there's no real talk of how many years. But I imagine maybe it could be a bridge deal as well, so the Rangers have some certainty. I think Lindgren would want a longer-term contract, but if you go with a bridge deal kind of like Schneider, you'll have an idea of what your cap situation looks like when it's expired, because there's a lot of uncertainty right now for the New York Rangers heading into next season. Now, another thing I wanted to touch on as well is Phil brought this up, and it was from the latest episode of the Steve Dangle podcast, and the conversation was brief, but in the close of the latest Steve Dangle podcast, reporter Chris, who is Chris Johnston, says he likes the idea of what Chris Drury is going to do, and he doesn't believe that the New York Rangers are done and could still see them getting aggressive in season. Of course, that was from Phil, and I talked about this just a couple days ago and a couple videos ago, that I believe that Chris Drury is saving the salary cap space to make a splash in season, right? Whether it be in season at the beginning of the season or at the trade deadline, I believe he's giving himself some wiggle room so he can make some type of move within the season. Now, a lot of Rangers fans wouldn't have agreed with that. I think they would rather, sign a free agent or something. But if you look at the trade market, like they just did with Riley Smith, I think in the trade market, you can get a better valued player there if you have the available cap space. So I think Chris Drury is playing his cards safe, which again, a lot of Rangers fans don't want. They want them to make big splashes to go for the Stanley Cup. But if you could have, a middle tier free agent this year, or make a big splash in the middle of the season, potentially involving Jacob Trouba, let's say, anything's possible, right? If you can get creative with it. Then I think the Rangers could be better off for that. But it's pretty interesting, something to think on. But let me know in the comments what you think of the projected contracts for both Ryan Lindgren and Braden Schneider. And let me know what you think of the Jacob Trouba situation. We'll have another video on that, I'm sure, very, very soon. And what you think of Chris Drury's offseason so far, and what you think he has plans, because I think he's planning something in season at this point. I think his offseason, of course, he still has to make these 2 signings. There's a couple other things to address, but in season, that's going to be the one interesting thing. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.